Followers of Eckankar believe in the existence of a divine force known as the Ek, or Holy Spirit, and they practice techniques like chanting and contemplation to connect with this divine energy. Eckankar teaches that individuals can explore their own spiritual truths and insights through direct experiences, rather than relying on dogma or doctrine. It's like a digital journey of inner exploration and self-realization, where individuals seek to understand their place in the universe and their connection to the divine.
Hello, my name is Lauren, and today we are going to be talking about a cult that exists based out of the state of Minnesota, which is actually my home state. I live in Colorado now, and before this I lived down in California, but when I was growing up and up through age 21, I lived in Minnesota. Eckankar is based out of Chanhassen, Minnesota. Imagine this. You're seeking answers. Maybe you're tired of organized religion and what you grew up with, or maybe you just want something a little bit deeper, something that's a little bit more filling, a little bit more cosmic. And then you hear a sound. And it's not just any sound, it's the sound current, the ancient wave that connects you directly to God. You chant who, your soul leaves your body, and suddenly you found your truth. This is what the followers of Eckankar believe. But is this spiritual enlightenment, or is it spiritual manipulation if you take a closer look?
And this is what the path of Ek is all about. Walking the path to God. Even more, it's about walking your path to God. Because your path is not my path, and my path is not yours. But that's okay, because when God made you, He made a unique being. You are soul. You are soul. And that's the identity behind your name, behind your physical form, behind the comeliness of your face. You are made in God's image, and it's an image of divine love. But remember, you are made in God's image, but so is your neighbor, and so am I. And so the respect that you would give to the one you most love, and when I say the one you most love, it can be person, animal, place, or thing. Whoever you give the most love to, if you can have that same love for yourself, then you are recognizing yourself as this holy, divine light of God that you are. That's what the path of Ek is about.
To understand Eckankar, we need to start with its founder, Paul Twitchell, a man shrouded in myth, contradictions, and a whole lot of controversy for good reason. To really break it down, Paul Twitchell was born in 1908, or maybe it was 1909, or maybe 1912. Honestly, you guys, as I looked this up, something that was really clear was that a lot of things are left unclear. His birth date is listed as changing multiple times, so between 1908 and 1912, that's a 4-year difference, so we're not talking about a huge range, but we don't know exactly when he was even born. That kind of gray area background also makes you question why it's so hard to get a clear read on who Paul is. Paul Twitchell dabbled in numerous spiritual and fringe movements throughout his life, including the Self-Realization Fellowship, Theosophy, Kirpal Singh's Sant Mat, and even Scientology. So he really dabbled in a lot of different things and had a pretty good understanding of how different religious groups function, make money, how maybe even he himself was able to be recruited into so many different groups. In the early 1960s, Twitchell began writing about soul travel. He really presents himself as a spiritual pioneer of sorts, but much of his early work really appears to be heavily plagiarized from these other gurus that he followed throughout different points in his life, although not for very long, apparently. He founded Eckankar in 1965, declaring himself the living Ek Master, a divine conduit on Earth. Now, let's just do some quick math. Let's take him on the older end. Let's say he was born in 1912. This means that he was, in his 50s, his mid-late 50s, when he finally founded Eckankar. So he had a lifetime of experience. This wasn't somebody that was, founding it as a really young man. This is someone that had a lot of experience and resources. Despite this, Twitchell's writings were oftentimes contradictory and at times mystical. Other times they were really, really strangely bureaucratic, laying out everything from soul maps to cosmic planes, all under the same Ek umbrella. But the biggest controversy is that much of what he taught really may not have been his at all. Twitchell, the founder of Eckankar, presented the teachings as a unique and divinely revealed path that he himself discovered through direct experience with spiritual beings. Twitchell called these beings the Ek Masters, if you can believe it or not. Because this group has been around for a long time, there's been a lot of research about the teachings and what he says, and it has been shown with this growing body of research, including works by scholars like David C. Lane, that much of the work is not original, but it was in fact copied. It was paraphrased or heavily inspired by what Twitchell was taught throughout his times in other groups or cults, specifically theosophy and cult literature, okay? So throughout those things, he really learned the bulk of what he ended up putting into Eckankar. From what he borrowed in St. Matt, one of the clearest sources that he drew from was from that religious group. It was a 19th century spiritual movement from India. Key elements that he took from that group include the spiritual sound current, or the idea of that, as the divine force that connects the soul to God or to their higher power. That wasn't something that God told him about or he just came up with. That sound current was actually, directly lifted from this other group that he was a part of, unfortunately for the members. Use of inner light and sound meditation to transcend spiritual planes, that was also not a new belief that he came up with. Also, the concept of having a living spiritual master, that wasn't something that he came up with himself either. They called it a set guru who guides and initiates through the inner worlds. That is not something that he came up with on his own. It's just not. Many of these ideas are just renamed. So Shabda or Nam, that's the spiritual sound current. That's what it was called in his previous religion. He changed it to Ek. The Satguru, he calls the living Ek Master or the Mahanta. And then the Satsang, which is the spiritual discourse, is the exact same term in Nar too. I can't remember how to pronounce this sometimes. I've said it too many times now. Eckankar, yeah. Whatever, there's only sometimes some superficial changes in terminology, which is kind of, in my opinion, that's what makes it like really crazy, is like he really didn't even do that good of a job switching it up. And there is the direct plagiarism. One of the most blatant examples of this plagiarism is Julian P. Johnson. Spell it, because I'm not trying to be, I just literally do not, I don't know. I'm dumb. It's Radhasoami. That teacher and the author of The Path of Masters, he was directly copied by Twitchell without citation. In some cases, Twitchell would swap out different words for other, for example, the examples we already gave, Sant Guru versus Eckmaster, or the different religion names would get swapped out, but the sentence structure, the metaphors, the exact teachings were exactly the same, almost identical. David C. Lean is a religious scholar, and he actually found dozens of examples of lifted passages from this religion. Makes sense. He was part of these religions. It's just not okay to then go write a new book and then say that it was given to you by God and that you got it from God. You didn't. You got it from your participation in other cults. Also, after Twitchell died in 1971, Eckankar tried to completely scrub his relationship to these other cults from everything, including his involvement with the Church of Scientology. He was even directly praised by L. Ron Hubbard, who started Scientology. It became very clear once you knew that he had lifted these passages and that things had been co-opted from other religions. Eckankar later declared many of his early works to be unauthorized or incorrect, which essentially disowns a lot of the published material, and especially the older materials. This is likely to distance the movement from the obvious overlaps with these traditions that, he was a part of himself when he, was part of the cult. The plagiarism allegations are not just academic footnotes. It's so important because they undermine Eckankar's claims to uniqueness and divine revelation. They're not getting divine revelation if he's just lifting this from other religions, other cults. Twitchell positioned himself as a spiritual pioneer and someone who was bringing new teachings to the West. Evidence shows, though, that he wasn't doing that at all. Some of these ideas had already been brought into the West, first of all, but they were packaged as what they were. The repackaging was just him repackaging it without offering credit. For a group that really stresses truth and personal integrity, you'd think that this would bother them. The fact that it didn't bother Twitchell is a huge red flag about the early stages of the group and their morals. In this section, I really want to make some of their core beliefs clear to you guys. So we're going to go through some key terms and talk about what their definitions would be, so that as we go through this and talk about their beliefs, we're really understanding exactly what we're talking about, because he does plagiarize so much from other religions. These words can mean different things to different people. So for example, to jump right in, a soul. A soul might mean something different to somebody. I believe in something like a soul, but what I believe in like a soul is definitely not the definition of a soul that I grew up with in evangelical Christianity. And for Eck, their definition of a soul is an eternal divine essence that reincarnates. Okay? It's an eternal divine essence that reincarnates. Now, I think some key differences between the soul definition here and what a soul would be considered in other religions or just by general, people in general, is the reincarnation piece of it, right? Obviously, most religions don't reinforce the idea of reincarnation. People would argue whether or not a soul is an eternal essence. Some religions might believe that you get to live eternally if you're like a top soul, if you're like a really good person, but if you're not, then your soul will be, done away with. They also believe that it's divine. I don't think that even Christians would consider their soul to be divine, at least not in any way that's different from saying like your marriage given to you by God is divine, and so is your soul, and so is your body. It's just different. I just want to point this out because when you hear an eternal divine essence that reincarnates, it's easy to just listen to those buzzwords and go, okay, yeah, like an eternal, it's a soul, it's an eternal spirit. But I think with their definition, they're really saying something a little bit different than what other religions would say. Then it's the sound current, Eck. It's the divine wave that you ride to God. We'll get more into that later, but you can just remember that the sound current, Eck, is the divine wave you ride to God. Then HU, or who. It's a sacred syllable, who, that aligns you with the current, with the sound current that you ride to God. That's who. That is a sacred syllable.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys their website here and what they say that Hu is. So, Hu is an ancient name for God. It has been used for thousands of years as a prayer and sacred chant to attune oneself to the presence of God. In many spiritual traditions, sound plays an important part in uplifting the individual. I don't like it. I would like. So fortunately, the only word is Hu. You've learned it. There's a free Hu app. They have a ton of information on their website. Here's how
Make
to
yourself comfortable. If you're a guest here and not familiar with us or our ways, that's fine. Just sit and enjoy. But when you shut your eyes, look into the center here, spiritual eye area, sometimes called third eye.
Karma and reincarnation are not very foreign to most people. They define this as cause and effect over multiple lives. Eckankar teaches that the universe is structured into multiple different planes, spiritual planes. Each plane is more refined and closer to God than the one that came before it. During sleep, or what Eckists would call soul travel, followers believe that they can access these other layers of existence, guided all by the Mahanta, or the spiritual master. The first one is the astral plane. The astral plane could be defined as the realm of emotions and dreams. Most people would unconsciously travel to the astral plane when they're asleep. Then there's the causal plane. This is where karmic records are kept. It's like a spiritual database of all of your lives that you've ever lived. Then there's the mental plane. This is the realm of thought and knowledge. Some people report that interacting with higher beings happens in the mental plane. Then there's the soul plane. The soul plane is a blissful, pure space where the soul reconnects with its true divine nature. Now, each plane is said to offer its different lessons and challenges, and climbing them is just part of the soul's journey to get closer back home to God. The goal is self-realization and God-realization, to understand your soul as a divine spark, so to speak. While all of this cosmology can feel really beautiful and fulfilling at first, meaningful to believers, there are several psychological concerns that we have to explore if we're going to dive into something like this. I think the first thing, which is a major one, is blurring the line of reality and dreams. Eckankar teaches that dreams aren't symbolic and they're not random either. In this religion, they're real spiritual experiences. Followers are totally encouraged to journal their dreams, analyze them on the daily as a part of their daily practice, and take them as spiritual instruction. This can lead to magical thinking, weakened critical thinking, or even difficulty distinguishing reality from subjective experiences, especially people who are prone to mental illnesses or psychosis or dissociation. Another issue that comes up is that when you're sleeping, you're not just resting. It's not restful anymore. Now you're doing rest as spiritual inner work. Followers are actually expected to do the inner work and chant Hu before bed, and meet their spiritual guides there in the sleep realm. This can cause sleep-related anxiety, especially for people who just aren't getting it. It can cause guilt and shame for people who are consistently, time and time again, falling short. There's a million reasons that people wouldn't be able to dream, and there's a million more why people aren't able to control their dreams. Making it part of a spiritual practice is only going to put you in a weird place mentally. Another thing to consider is that when I was religious, I felt monitored by God. Now, whether or not you think that's a good thing is up to you, but The people practicing this religion, they're also being monitored when they're asleep in the other planes. I at least wasn't worried about sinning in my sleep. If I were part of this religion, I'd be pretty concerned about what I was getting up to in my dreams. I believe that the Mahanta is watching you on the inner planes, including during sleep, is just going to make you feel like you're under surveillance 24/7. People will probably feel spiritually monitored during this, not just in their waking life, but while they're asleep too. This can really increase dependency on the group, and it can reduce their psychological autonomy. Another thing to consider is that they're being told to not interpret their dreams how they normally would using logic or modern psychology. Trauma, nightmares, or mental distress are often to blame for weird themes in dreams, where this religion would reframe them as karmic lessons or spiritual tests. This reframing is just going to make people feel broken, invalidate their very real emotional needs that might be going on, and delay treatment for mental health issues that might be happening.
When you finish the day and you go to bed to get some rest, the human or the physical body sleeps, but you as soul, as everybody else who goes to sleep, soul leaves the human body and goes out in the other worlds and takes up life there and continues life there, I must say. Because we measure everything here on earth by the waking and the sleeping state of the human body. Therefore, we assume that when we go to sleep, we're just starting a dream or we end a dream, but actually it's tapping in to the expanded awareness of soul as it is existing, as we are existing on inner planes simultaneous with existence on the earth. Now, all that remains for most people is to remember, at least a little bit. Begin remembering your dreams to get an idea of who and what you are as soul. The dream state can help you to see most of the misery or happiness that you have in your life today, you have made for yourself.
Then they have different practices. A practice is really something that you implement into daily life to support your spiritual beliefs. So when I was a Christian, a practice that I had might have been reading my Bible every morning for 15 minutes and praying. Another practice might have been praying before I would go to sleep at night. Now that I'm more of an agnostic atheist, I would say that some of my Al-Anon work is more of a spiritual practice to me. That's something that I participate in, and I read through their booklets. That's something that I do regularly, so that could be a practice. For this religion, they do Hu chanting. Now, if you remember from the definitions, Hu is the sacred syllable. It's the wave current that you ride to God. Then they believe in dream journaling. They believe that dreams are believed to be communication from higher beings. Okay, so they like to dream journal to help them remember their dreams. They also have a practice of visualization and soul travel. And then they have a practice of reading Ek discourses, which is really only available if you're actually initiated into Eckankar. They don't just simply meditate. If you became a medder of Eckankar, you wouldn't just meditate, you would travel. It's not metaphoric to them. They literally believe that they leave their bodies to go and explore higher planes.
Are so many of you seated right here in the audience who in one way or another, once or twice in your lifetime at least, who have had some kind of experience that the average person doesn't have. Near-death experiences, out-of-the-body soul travel, astral projection, sometimes seeing visions and all this. To most of you who have had these experiences, they came unannounced, often before you even heard about Eckankar. And then you wonder, what happened to me? Am I going crazy? And you ask people, what happened? You ask a minister, he doesn't know. You ask people you respect, people who are into philosophy or psychology or one of the medical arts. They don't know. They've heard something about it. But one of the advantages here of Eckankar and the X seminars is that you can come here, you can meet other people who in one way or another have had experiences which are beyond what most people in the street have today. And I say most people in the street, and this isn't quite true, because as we found out recently, it's like 1 out of every 3 people in America has had some kind of extraordinary experience out of the body or something of this nature. Not that they understood what it was, but they had the experience. We are here to tell them, to give them a frame of reference about what this experience means. The light and sound are directly from the voice of God. They are to uplift you spiritually.
This soul travel is taught as a true skill in their religion, a science and a proof that their master is who he claims to be. When Paul Twitchell suddenly died in 1971, the question of leadership threatening to splinter the movement really put some stress on the group. Twitchell had built Eckankar around himself, so who would go ahead and be the next living master? Darwin Gross was named the next successor. Later, he was excommunicated under very messy circumstances. Now, there are splits in a lot of religions, okay? There are a lot of denomination breakups and all of that, so I don't want to be too hard on them. But when it was 1981 and Darwin Gross appointed Harold Klemp as his successor, things went downhill like so fast. The 2 major points that apparently caused the issue is that Gross, even after giving the spiritual authority to Klemp, he thought that he was just simply going to be able to treat him like an assistant and delegate administrative responsibilities to him. He didn't actually think that he was like handing over all of his power. Klemp obviously had an issue with this and was like, I'm not just your administrative assistant if I'm being like the figurehead of Eckankar, like you need to back away. And so once Klemp took over, the organization had to completely sever ties with Gross. So he handed over power, but didn't really mean to. And then because he wanted it back, they had to completely cut communication. He was completely excommunicated from the group that he had led for over a decade, which is insane to me. Gross did later try to reclaim authority again as the rightful Mahanta by launching a breakaway group called ATOM or ATOM. It was Ancient Teachings of the Masters. This was in 1983, and he really accused Eckankar of betraying its spiritual mission and really publicly criticized them and Klemp for what they did to him. This caused legal drama that I'm just not even going to bother getting into. Well, I'll get into a little bit. When he made this new group, ATOM, he copied a lot of the teachings because he allegedly still believed in them. It's just that he was the true leader, but they said, you just plagiarized our entire religion and named it ATOM, and that became a really big issue. There's also some claims that there was some financial impropriety going on, but I won't go into that because there's no proof and we don't really know. Financial mistakes or misuse can go on in many different institutions, and it doesn't really mean that it's a cult or not. In the bigger picture, Gross's messy departure just really reveals even further how centralized and authoritarian Eckankar really is. Even a former major spiritual leader, beloved for 10 years, can just be cast out and erased. It also shows how spiritual authority and high control groups can be political and not divine. This turned into a legal battle, and you'd think that if he was a spiritual leader with a direct line to God, that this whole thing wouldn't have happened in the first place. Then Harold Klemp became the new Mahanta, leaving Eck master. Now, I'm going to have to do a little more research on the word Mahanta, but I know the word Mahatma obviously, so I wonder if this is like a plagiarized version of that where you just rearrange some letters. I maybe will bite my tongue. I'm probably showing my ignorance here, but I don't know what Mahanta is. Then Klemp came in and reshaped the group. They emphasized organizational secrecy and limiting outsider access. Today, Klemp still remains in power with very, very little public visibility. Only senior people in the organization, senior, what they would call initiates, have real access to Klemp. In Eckankar, spiritual hierarchy is tightly controlled. Only high-level initiatives are considered ready to hear the full truth. Critics say this fosters dependence, secrecy, and blind loyalty in pursuit of receiving the truth later on once you've already dug yourself into a hole for the group. All right, so now you know a little bit about what they believe, but what are the issues that other people have with the group? Well, one issue is plagiarism. There are direct comparisons that you can make between Twitchell's texts and Julian Johnson, for example. The cultic structure has a centralized authority, isolation from former members, and a discouragement of critical thinking. All of this enforces the cult structure and keeps people in the group. It definitely doesn't come across like something that I would suggest you get involved with.
I was in the car with my dad, and we were going to the hardware store. I was upset because I didn't really want to go. I sat in the back seat, not happy about going to the store. Next to me, I felt a happy vibration and was aware of the presence of the Eckmaster Rebizar Tars. It felt like hugging love. It was calming and I felt relaxed. The anger and sadness had disappeared for that moment. Walking into the store with my dad, I dragged my feet. Then, for a second time, even though I couldn't see him, I could feel the special presence of Rebizar. Since I was still a bit upset, I noticed that when Rebizar was with me, I felt lighter and happier. At that moment, my feelings went downwards. Again, the tingly, happy feeling of Rebizar, like he was walking next to me. When we were about to check out of the store, when I feel Rebizar's presence again. At that moment, I felt more happier than in my whole life. He was even with me during the drive home. It felt like a big spiritual shift for me, like I grew spiritual. Now that I look back at that experience, I realize that it was such a blessing. Now that I helps me move forward to being 9 years old. Did you know that Rebizar has been an Eckmaster for a long time? He has said to be over 500 years old. He helped Sri Harald, the current leader of Eckankar, assist people and act as a guardian. That is how I feel about him. He is a guardian for me. Thank you.
It might be abuse of authority going on as well. There are claims that questioning the master is considered as spiritual regression. So people are unlikely to even question what their authority is saying, and if it's abused, people are willing to follow it kind of blindly. And then finances. This is a multi-level initiation system that people are taking part in when they join Eckankar. There are advanced discourses only available via paid subscription, and you're definitely making a financial commitment if you choose to get into this group. From the outside, Eckankar appears to be loving, peaceful, and pretty wholesome overall.
Which usually involves Anik and I reading one of our favorite books together. And it's usually a really sweet time. After one of those hard days at work, which everybody can have, the stress was rolling around in my head and my mind just didn't want to let it go. And I thought to myself, this is not how I enjoy reading with my daughter. I usually like being a completely open channel for love, especially before bedtime. So I decided to stop for a few moments and sing Hugh, this love song to God. And as I got into it, I thought to myself, I got this idea, this inner nudge to put all of my attention on how much I love the Hugh. And as I did that, after about 5 hues or so, I realized that I was absolutely, completely free. I was washed away of all my stress. And I completely filled with love, and I was raring to go for that story. I also had a couple more opportunities to practice that with loving success. And what I had found out, for me, as I thought about this, to me, it was like, for me, finding that wonderful, magical, special place where all of my love for the Hugh and its love for me were one.
Former members tell a hugely different story. One of manipulation, fear, spiritual demotion, and silence surrounding those who leave. To understand what life is actually like inside of Eckankar, we turn to former members, people who once participated in this group, once chanted Who with everyone else, believed in the Eck Masters, hung out at their friends' houses, and then made the decision to leave for themselves. When it comes to cults, we've talked about the BITE model before. The B stands for behavior control, I stands for information control, T stands for thought control, and E stands for emotional control. When a group has all of this criteria met, it meets the criteria for a cult or a high control group.
Welcome back to Is It a Cult or Not a Cult? Eckankar.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. It is.
It might not be overtly violent or destructive, but that doesn't mean that it's harmless. By Stephen Hassan's BITE model, Eckankar could be a high control group. When it comes to behavior control, there are rules about reading or speaking to ex-members. With information control, there are exclusive teachings, secret discourses, and you're told kind of what to pay attention to. With thought control, they may reframe doubts as lower self chatter. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And for emotional control, there is guilt for the people who are questioning their faith in Eckankar or fear of karmic consequences for leaving. Eckankar, like many spiritual movements, offers a powerful promise for people, personal connection to the divine. But that promise comes at a cost. And it's one that's measured in not intangible things, but in money, in years, in genuine emotional turmoil, time spent in therapy, and spiritual dependency.
Yesterday I visited the world headquarters of Eckankar, which some people say mean things about. This is a new age religious group that's really into light and they have a ton of money. Now, yeah, I had some questions, but if this is really a cult, why do their communal meditations rip so hard? Now, the haters always want to point out that this group was founded by a Scientologist who thought he could sell more books than L. Ron Hubbard. Like, Well, I can tell you from what I saw with my own eyes, it is abundantly clear that a nice man from Wisconsin named Harold Klemp runs the block these days. I know this living prophet is legit because his pictures are plastered all over the place. If you're so close-minded you can't appreciate the incredible paintings of God beginning the ascension in a suburb of Minneapolis, well, you have no taste. Yeah, it's a little weird so much of the art depicts the living prophet. I guess when he's not around, he helps you do stuff like start fires. He's sad-ass. If this is a cult, why are the reviews so good? Transformative. 4 stars. I was fooled into believing a made-up lie. Now I'm ruined. My ex-husband laundered millions of dollars through Eckankar projects.
If you're watching this because you've been affected by a cult or by Eckankar itself, you are not alone. You're not crazy, and there is a life after cults. Healing is slow and it's not linear, but it is possible, and you deserve to get the best help available to you. If you would ever be interested in sharing your story, if you've ever been through something like this, there is a link in my description that you can fill out to become a guest on this show. I would love to hear more about your story and share it with others as well. Please like this video if it was interesting to you, and if this is the first time you've ever heard about Eckankar, I'd love to get a little bit more, eyes on this cult. Subscribe for more videos like this. I do a lot of deep dives, case studies, and interviews with real people, and try to promote understanding, not to bash anyone that we're looking at or their beliefs. So we come here to understand, not to shame anyone or criticize anybody else. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have been having so much fun making these videos. I actually recently just hit 1,000 For context, I had a goal to hit 40 subscribers by the end of April, and now it's May 12th, and I have over 1,000, and it means so much to me that you guys see the effort that I put into these videos, and you guys have taken the time to write out so many thoughtful comments. I feel like a broken record saying thank you so much onto all of your comments you've left that are so kind, but it really does mean so much to me. It has been really fun, and I'm super excited to keep making videos and hearing your thoughts. Have a great week. Thank you.